Welcome to the Misfit One Lifestyles with Elizabeth Colin. She will awaken and connect with your Misfit One. Are you tired of the ups and downs in your life? Are you ready to live a healthy lifestyle once and for all? We are talking about all aspects of your life. Being fit is not just physical, it's also your mind and soul. Learn how to take steps in your life to move towards your goals. Elizabeth's goal is for everyone listening to the sound of her voice to get fit. Let's get focused, let's get intentional, and let's transform. Now here's your host, Elizabeth Colin.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Misfit One Lifestyles with your host, Elizabeth Colin, also known as Misfit One. Listen guys, I cannot wait for you to talk to this doctor and hear all the things that he has going on, because I cannot tell you how many times people have asked me about liposuction. I don't know, but I do know who does. Dr. David Amron, how are you?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Very good. So glad to be here.
I am so happy you are here. Can you tell everybody what you're doing, a little bit about yourself before we go further?
Yeah. So I have been in practice now 29 years. I am located in Los Angeles, Beverly Hills. We also have a center, the Roxbury Institute in Salt Lake City, Utah. My individual practice for the whole time I've been in practice, over 25 years, has been focused on one procedure, which is liposuction and liposuction surgery, and all different aspects of it. Cosmetic liposuction, certainly, a lot of complicated revision liposuction surgery. And yes, I'm very involved and have been the pioneer of the treatment of a disease for lip edema, which is a fat storage disease. So my whole practice is around liposuction. It's a kind of super specialization. I've done over 12,000 surgeries, and I love it.
You know what's so crazy is because I lit up lip edema, and it was like fat storage in legs.
Mm-hmm.
So can we talk about that a little bit? Can you tell them more about lipodemia?
Yeah, lipedema. Yeah. So
Lipedema.
yeah, we could start with that. There's so much good stuff to talk about. So lipedema is a disease, a fat storage disorder, very under-recognized around the world, identified way back in 1940 at the Mayo Clinic, and most people and doctors still don't know about it. It will present typically around puberty, the teenage years, and then it slowly gets worse throughout a person's lifetime. And you pick up the gene, so it's genetically inherited from a parent. Either a mother or father is carrying the gene and passes it on. And it has a characteristic look to it and characteristic symptoms. So it commonly gets confused with lymphedema, which is really a separate disease. And it presents with swelling that wraps around the entire leg, generally from the groin or outer buttock area all the way down to the ankle, where the leg begins to lose its shapeliness to it. The arms many times become involved later on. Sometimes the upper buttock area has this unnatural ledge or shelf that goes around it. So it's a very characteristic look that's not that difficult to diagnose. And along with that goes typical symptoms, typically tenderness to pressure. It's a very characteristic symptom of lipedema. People say when I get a massage or my dog jumps on me, it's sensitive and tender. Easy
Right.
bruisability, swelling, and it progressively gets worse. And it eventually can begin to affect the lymphatics. And this is the important thing I just want to say. It's essentially not responsive to diet or exercise. That's a really important thing. The patients are told from a young age, just eat less and exercise more, it's going to go away. They get all this guilt and blame and shame that goes on. Many patients have eating disorders because of it. And it's simply been misdiagnosed. And it goes on through their whole lifetime. They've had many different opportunities to be diagnosed by doctors, by personal trainers, and people keep on missing the diagnosis.
So I want to pause here and kind of reinstate what you said, because the fact of it is it's not normal fat tissues, right? it looks and appears as if it is fat, but because it's all the way down, right? It starts from your thigh, you said growing area,
Mm-hmm.
typically, and
Mm-hmm.
then goes all the way down. So it looked like Miss Piggy legs.
In a way, yeah. So there's two patterns. One is like a column-like look. I've got a book. My book here can show photographs of it, or you may put things up yourself or refer people to resources. But there's a column-like looks legs in one pattern. The other pattern is more of a triangulated pattern that kind of like gets very narrow at the ankles and is more prominent in the upper buttock area. But one thing, and this is a good time to talk about it. People confuse. Once a person is overweight, they're just called fat. And this is a really important starting point with things, because there's a whole confusion about, who's fat and who may need liposuction and who has lipedema. So, and this is a complicated discussion, but it goes back to
Let's talk about it. We'll break
people,
it down.
well, yeah, this is important. People measuring themselves by a scale, by jumping on a scale, saying, I am overweight, and because of that, I am fat, and I just simply need to lose weight. Okay. And then you get into that BMI index is a way of judging weight that's supported by the medical community. And it's really not a good way of looking at many people, especially with lipedema, because you've got to understand who is just overweight, but in proportion and needs to lose weight, and who maybe not even overweight, but out of proportion and may need liposuction, because it's about proportion and balance more than it's about being overweight. It's actually a very important chapter in my book I go through in terms of understanding a person's body from a standpoint of disproportion. And typically that's a genetic thing. If somebody doesn't have lipedema, let's say somebody doesn't have lipedema, and they've got a skinny, bony upper body, and they've got saddlebags, sticking out on their side, and their mom has it, their sister has it, not even lipedema, and that person's told to go lose weight, they can't get rid of those saddlebags because they've got disproportion. They need lipo. On the other hand, you might have a person who is completely in proportion, might weigh 250 pounds, but they're in proportion. They should never get liposuction done.
Right.
They need to lose weight.
Right. That was me. I was always proportioned, but I was big. Right.
Okay.
I was 200 and almost 300 pounds. I was 250.
So it sounds like you were proportionate but overweight, and the solution to that is weight loss, either dietary stuff or things like weight loss surgery, and it's not liposuction.
Right. And so liposuction, I always used to think about that, right? And I just did mine the old-fashioned way, just eating and exercising. It was more inner work than anything, because even at size 24, I was still working out every day, but I was, all messed up. So I had to work on the inside, and that's what I focus on, is the inside. When we work on the inside, the outside will reflect.
Yeah.
And so what's so important about what you do and what you just said is not complicated at all. I love how you broke it down for all of us. You can be overweight and proportioned, and you just need to lose weight, whatever weight you feel best, right? You talk that over with your doctor. Or you could be very small. And I've seen that so many times, Dr. David, where somebody is very tiny at the top or big at the bottom, like that heart shape, but and big at the bottom. And it is a lot of times genetic. And catch that, you guys. He says genetic. So, you look at your mama, you look at your daddy, you got your daddy hips. You know what I mean? It could be genetic, and it could be something that you can't do. What do you say?
That's exactly right. The first one, if you're just overweight, there is, and you're in proportion, there is a lot you can do, like you've done yourself. If you're disproportionate, generally there's only so much you can do. Sometimes you get what I call maxed out, where you can look at a person, they're not even overweight, they're in shape, and they can't lose those areas. They're told to go lose more and more weight. And again, they can't really with it because of genetic disproportion. Now, it gets more interesting because in the genetic disproportion, you've got two categories. One is just simply cosmetically, genetically disproportionate, like maybe just a person with some saddlebags or mom's. The other one is lipedema, which is a disease that again has characteristic disproportion in these predictable patterns.
Can you tell them again, what are the symptoms of lipedema?
Yeah. So, in medicine, we like to use that term signs and symptoms. So signs are what it looks like, the characteristic look, and now symptoms, which you're correctly referencing. With lipedema, there are a few characteristic symptoms. One is tenderness to pressure. Commonly, about 85 to 90% of patients have some degree of pain with their lipedema, and it's a very characteristic type of pain. They'll say, when somebody squeezes my legs or get a pedicure done or my dog jumps on me, it's a sensitivity to tenderness to pressure is characteristic. Easy bruisability is very common. So you ask your average woman, do you bruise easily? And a lot will say, yeah, but with lipedema, it's like 99% will say I bruise easily with it. Swelling is common, another characteristic symptom. And finally, most patients have hyperflexibility of joints. They can either be double jointed or can do splits or bend their fingers back because there's a connective tissue deficit that goes along with lipedema.
Okay, that's mind blowing, you guys, because y'all have seen it. I know I've seen it in yoga. Like you would think they can't do anything because they're very, and now that I think about it,
Right.
oh my
Yeah,
God.
it very, you'll see some patients who maybe with lipedema are 300 pounds and you
They could
just assume they're not going to be so flexible and mobile. And they said, yeah, it's really weird. I could do splits and stuff like that with it. So, yes, a lot of these patients have that hyperflexibility. A lot of patients that, I talk to were in gymnastics or ballet when they were younger. Now it's really interesting because they have found their way to different sports or activities that benefited from their increased flexibility with lipedema. One thing I just got to mention though with lipedema, I didn't mention this, is that it's such a high proportion of patients have lipedema. It's about 10% of the female population. So this is not a rare condition. In fact, it's twice as common as lymphedema, which it commonly gets confused with. So it's a pretty common condition. Just a lot of patients get misdiagnosed with very mild lipedema.
Oh my goodness, you guys. This is like, my mouth is like, what? Because the more I think about it, I see it. I've seen it several times and not know what it is. And
Yeah.
I love that you're saying that it's not just, okay, you could just go lose weight. No, no. And that's crazy because that is what they're being told, or trying to get all kind of things done that is not beneficial. It comes up with no,
Well,
they're frustrated, you know?
I mean, more than frustrated. I mean, this whole guilt, shame, blame thing, eating disorders begins when they're younger. I mean, they carry that emotional burden throughout their lifetime. But, again, it's like once you get clued into lipedema, it's not that difficult to diagnose. And that's why I say it's crazy. We got to be teaching other doctors to diagnose this in the teenage years of girls so we can start preventative measures. And like you kind of were saying, it's like characteristic symptoms, characteristic signs, and a family history. But even my kids, I've said this before, we could be out at Disneyland or in an airport or, in Las Vegas. My young kids will say, Daddy, does that woman have lipedema? And I said, and they're almost always right. I go, yeah. And I didn't really teach them in terms of diagnosing it, but they've, paid attention. These are young kids, age 7 to 17.
Yeah, they hear you, they understand. And now I'm telling you, my eyes are opened, and everybody out there listening, what's so crazy is I know you either know someone or may think it's you, right? And if you
You're
think
right.
you have it, what are some of the ways that we can go about it? What's the kind of solution in if we have it?
Okay.
Preventive.
Well, the first thing, it starts with anything in medicine, you want an accurate diagnosis. You want to, is this lipedema? Is it not lipedema? The problem is most doctors still don't know about it. Maybe only about 10% at most know about it. So it's many times hard to get diagnosed. I mean, we do virtual consultations and all that stuff, so that can we be able to diagnosing. But one of the first questions I ask patients when I see for a consultation is, how did you hear of the term lipedema? And unfortunately, most have said they just went on the internet. Things were not making sense. They typed in painful legs or swollen legs or fat legs, or were searching, and they kind of did investigative work and came across this term lipedema. And I call it the aha moment. It's like, oh my God, all of a sudden things start to make sense, and their whole life, now, just makes sense with things like that, back to when they were a kid with it. So the problem is patients are diagnosing themselves. I mean, the problem and the good part is, I guess, they're diagnosing themselves. There's so much information nowadays on the internet about lipedema. The awareness, thank God, is finally increasing. There are many different resources. So patients can actually go on the internet, read about things, understand the characteristic symptoms, and many times kind of look at the way patient looks, look at the symptoms, look at their family history on their mom or the dad's side, the female's the dad's side, and essentially are self-diagnosing themselves. And they're usually right about it. I got to tell you, when patients say, come to me for thinking they have lipedema, they almost always do.
Right.
Because if it looks and smells like lipedema, it probably is lipedema.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. You mentioned a book for one. What is your book called, and where could we get it?
I don't know if it's a reflection. So it came out last month. I am proud of it because it was a lot of work, but it's a really great book. I got to say this. It's called Liposculpture and Lipedema Surgery: A Guide for the Patient and Pearls for the Surgeon. So this is a interesting book that straddles, usually in medicine, you have either textbooks for doctors only, or you've got these patient, just very generalized guidebooks. This actually book straddles both worlds and has a lot of great information for patients to understand, and for doctors, and pearls for doctors to understand important things about technique. It's broken into 3 chapters. The first one is cosmetic liposuction, that goes into a lot of my important principles and techniques with liposuction. So the thing we talked about, balance and proportion, important principle. The safe plane, cosmetic units, understanding is important. There's a whole area on revision liposuction surgery, and then there's a huge final chapter on lip edema.
So where can we get it?
Oh, good question. It's on Amazon. It's on Amazon, available, and I think it's on Kindle. You can get it also.
Okay. And then also, you had mentioned earlier that you do virtual consultations. How would they reach out to you to get connected to you?
They reach out through, I think, the internet. They can go on one of the websites that we have. There's my own website, Dr. Amron. Chelsea, what's Dr. Amron? AmronMD.com, AMRON. For lipedema, there's another website, advancedlipedematreatment.com. There's another one, the Roxbury Institute. And I was put a phone number right in front of me here. Since you asked that question, 424-333-9944.
All right.
424-333-9944. Call now.
Call because we have questions. And I want to talk about the liposuction part of it as well.
Okay.
Because
sure.
I do get asked that a lot. And before I became, what I do now, I was a personal trainer. I've been in this industry for almost 20 years. And I was a personal trainer. And when I was a personal trainer, I would see people who had liposuction and they gained weight, and they would raise up their shirt to show me, and they looked like a monster. It had pits and do you know what I'm talking about?
Sure. I mean, because I do a lot of revision work. So,
That's what I was saying.
so
You said revision. Yes.
Yeah.
That was scary. So it scared the bejesus out of me.
Right.
I would I'm too afraid because of those pits and things like that.
Sure.
But let's talk about liposuction in general.
I could talk about it in general. I could talk about it very specifically. I love to talk about it. So first of all, I just want to say that, as a personal trainer, there should, personal trainers should also understand the limitations of what a patient can do with things too. And again, back to that thing about disproportion. Sometimes I see personal trainers pushing patients that are literally maxed out to keep on doing more and work harder when they've got either a disease or something else going on. So just a quick comment on that. So, liposuction, let's talk about that, because I love talking about this stuff. So it's, it still is, I think it's the most common cosmetic surgery. I heard it was number one, and then breast was number two, but it's now back to be number one in terms of cosmetic surgeries. It is commonly done. I will say this, it's one of the most difficult cosmetic surgeries to get right. It has one of the highest revision rates of any cosmetic surgery. It has one of the highest complication rates of any cosmetic surgery, both for not only what we call morbidity, but even mortality too. It has, if it's not done in the proper way, it has a high complication rate, especially when combined with other surgeries and procedures. And again, I go through a lot of this stuff in my book, and safety with things. So
that didn't just give me a warm and fuzzy, Dr. David. That made me more afraid. I'm like, oh, I'm not that I would do it, but I'm just saying is now like, oh crap. But there is a way to do it where it can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. And like everything in life, you want to, when you're interested in doing something, especially as serious as surgery or cosmetic surgery, I could talk about this, like take your time, understand, learn whether it's lipedema or just cosmetic liposuction. Don't just fall prey to like some marketing tactic or, price-driven thing or this thing or that thing, or even many times things on social media. Where patients are like, desires to do something quickly, but pull the reins back, slow down, understand. That's kind of one of the main reasons I wrote this book. It's a great guide. It's not just promoting me, but it goes through so many important things to understand about liposuction before you do something. Because I'll say this, the most important decision you make, if you're going to do something, first of all, is it the right thing to do? And then if it's the right thing to do, who you're choosing to do it, putting your trust in that person to do it. And so many things go into it. It's not always, who's been in practice the longest or who charges the most or who a friend recommended. Take your time to find that surgeon. But, if I can get into some of the important, things about liposuction to pay attention to specifically.
Please.
Yeah.
That's what I was literally about to ask. I'm going to talk about principles, and I'm going to talk about things about technique. So one important principle we started talking about is balance and proportion, understanding who's a candidate for liposuction, who is disproportionate, and who simply just overweight, needs to lose weight. That's an important thing. Secondly, it's looking at the body from a standpoint, a three-dimensional standpoint of what I call cosmetic units of the body, and understanding if liposuction's approach, how to achieve the right type of three-dimensional shape in areas. If I'm doing the calves and ankles or the thighs, I may do part of it, but I may do the entire thing 360 degrees to get the right type of three-dimensional shape, because the body is very three-dimensional, and especially with lipedema, because it involves entire units of the body. And I've developed a lot of this 360-degree liposuction type of way of doing things that's now beginning to be done by a lot of other surgeons. Then we get into a lot of technical things in terms of understanding the anesthetic approach to liposuction. Is it done under general anesthesia, which has certain implications from a safety standpoint and technical disadvantages, because liposuction is a different surgery. It's not a cutting and sewing surgery. So when a person's getting their breast done or even a facelift done, you want the person lying still. Well, lipo is different. You're sculpting a plane that curves. And if you're under general anesthesia and you're intubated, lying there pretty much in one position, you can never get the optimal results. And not only from a cosmetic standpoint, we then get into a topic that I cover in the book called the safe plane. And if a surgeon gets out of the safe plane into a deeper structure, bad things can happen. I commented about the death of unfortunate death of a Brazilian model in South America with lipedema last month, and where the importance of the surgeon staying in the safe plane to not get into deeper structures with things that may have been involved in her death with it. So there's safety considerations about the anesthetic approach. I prefer to avoid general anesthesia for a number of reasons, from safety to recovery to primarily results. I don't want to go into the details of this, my book does with it. Then we get into how you design things, the design of how you're approaching things, where your incision points are,
Some of the technique that I use, I have a multi-step technique. I prepare the tissue first. I remove most of the fat in a sculpted way. I go back with a device called Vaser to then emulsify the fat. I then do the fine sculpting. I may do a skin tightening step as a final step to maximize tightening. So it just goes on and on and on. But all that stuff kind of plays into what you mentioned. If it's not done perfectly and well, you can get a bad result with things. You can get, the surgeon may have created irregularities by jabbing the skin in a disrespectful way with a cannula. He may have not blended things properly. He may have been overly aggressive in the wrong patient. He may have created an unnatural shape that just doesn't look natural. I mean, it should always look natural with a liposuction surgery.
Right. This is, I am like, oh my gosh, because lipo, I haven't heard about it in a long time. And for you to say it's back, number one, that's like, wow to me, because everybody's doing that, the
Cool
free,
sculpting?
yes,
Freeze the
yeah,
fat. Well,
yeah.
that you're right about that. I mean, so there were many years when that was like, hugely popular. And I'm not going to say it isn't popular, but I think that there's certainly limitations with it. There's been some problems that occurred surprisingly, with even cool sculpting that we would never have predicted, where it's actually overgrowing fat and cause scar tissue in patients. But I think that people are beginning to realize the limitations of it. I'm not going to say that everybody should be doing liposuction, but there's limitations to a lot of this non-surgical invasive stuff. But that said, I will say this though, again, people should be very careful about moving ahead with a surgical procedure. And a lot of people, there's a lot of marketing that goes on. There's a lot of people that are marketing for everything. You want to find that kind of specialist in that area that is doing the best job, for doing nose jobs or breast surgery or tummy tucks or liposuction or facelift surgery, because not everybody is great at everything.
Absolutely. That's a good point to make out when you are looking at the fact of getting something done. And liposuction is so personal, like you said. It has so many different layers to it. So it is something, is it cosmetic or do you have a disease? And that makes a difference on how it's approached, correct?
I've said this before, liposuction is so much more than sucking out fat. I mean, and I think that not enough respect is given to the procedure itself. And I'll say even that a lot of surgeons, they look at it like not as important as other things. They take a lot of pride in their facelifts or nose jobs or breast surgery. They kind of look at liposuction, let's just add that on to it. But there's so much to the art of liposuction. The art and philosophy of it really goes into nailing it. I mean, you want to get it done right the first time and avoid doing anything to have to do a revision thing, because that's much harder to do. If it's screwed up the first time around, and I know this from experience doing so much revision work, it's much harder to get it right the next time around with it. So again, take your time as a patient, educate yourself, arm yourself with knowledge so that you can make that right decision and have a lower chance of making a wrong decision with things.
That's why we need the book. You guys heard that, right? You have to make sure you take time to educate yourself and know what you're doing. Surgery is no joke, but I like how you said surgery is a art. And I thank you so much for opening our eyes today, because this has been very, very informative to me. And I'm totally happy that now I can now say, hey, let me connect you with Dr. David and see what he can do for you, or if there's something going on, because I promise you, I'm like your kids. Ooh, I bet you that they have it, right? Because of the signs that you said. So
Yeah.
again, tell us how can we connect with you? Or the best website. Give me the website.
Well, I think if you look me up, David Amron, Amron, you're going to see all the stuff on it. You'll see
Okay.
my individual website. MRMD, you'll come up to the Advanced Lipedema Treatment Program, that site. You'll come to Roxbury Institute. I mean, you'll find me all over the internet with things. But I got to tell you, I cannot believe half an hour has gone by so quickly with stuff. And you're great. I think you were such a great host. And I want to thank you so much for, allowing me to talk about this stuff. And specifically, about lipedema, this disease that we need more awareness about, and taking the opportunity to increase the awareness and make people aware of this disease, because if it changes one person's life, that's huge.
Yes, yeah, and it did. It changed my life today because I am more knowledgeable on it, and I know everybody who's listening has been changed. So thank you again. And before we leave off, because you're on this whole platform, and my whole thing is about living fit. And when I say living fit, I mean focus plus intentional equals transformation. And that is exactly what you did. You've been doing this for, like you said, the 25 years or so. You have focused on one thing. You focused on it. You moved with intentions, and you are truly transforming lives. So thank you again. I mean, this.
But I gotta just jump in again. One thing you said I gotta come back to is connecting with your internal self and the beauty within. And even though I do all these external things, I am in so much support of that. I really encourage everybody in the world, especially women, to really connect with their internal beauty and the power and love and strength within. It's really so important, and to kind of like sometimes transcend some of the, physical external stuff and really connect with that internal person. Very important thing.
Right, it is. And thank you, because that's exactly what it's all about. And even if that, when you sit down and think about it and look at it, it may be that you do have a disease. It may be something that you physically cannot do. So, be still, listen to yourself. And I love those words of wisdom. You want to leave anything else for the people? Any closing?
Oh, I got to go visit North Carolina. I've been dying to go to the Carolinas. I know you're up in North Carolina. I want to get to Asheville and check it out. So
you let me know when. We'll show you. We'll show you a good time. Thank you so much.
All right, Elizabeth. All right. God bless and happy holidays. Okay, to everybody.
God bless you as well. Until next time, you guys, live fit. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Misfit One Lifestyles. Listen, when you are fed up and sick and tired of living this stifled, overwhelmed, and overstressed life, and you're ready to live the fullest, richest, and healthiest life by gaining more confidence, more energy, and more clarity, living in your best self, you know what to do, right? Go ahead, go to my website, misfit1.com. Sign up for our online courses, Creating Healthy Habits, so that you too can live fit, focus, move with intention, and transform your life.